A poor girl was abandoned on the road, but a millionaire found her. And what he did next. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching from. Let's begin. The sun beat down on Arizona's arid heartland with an intensity that seemed to want to erase any trace of life resisting on that forgotten stretch of dirt road between Phoenix and the district of Cactus Creek. The reddish dust rose with each hesitant step of the girl with cracked feet and nearly broken sandals, who walked alone, not knowing where she was going, nor why she had been left behind. Her name was Louisa. She was only 8 years old, but carried on her thin shoulders the weight of a childhood marked by silences, closed doors, and promises that were never kept. Hours earlier, her stepmother had sent her to buy flour at Jeremy's general store in the village. She said she would wait on the other side of the road, sitting on a cement bench under the shade of a mesquite tree. Louisa obeyed. She bought the flour, smiled with the politeness her mother had taught her before leaving forever, and returned with the small bag in her hands. But upon returning to the agreed spot, she found only the empty road, the absent shade, and the hot wind raising the dust. She called for her stepmother, waited for minutes that turned into hours until she understood that there was no mistake, no delay. She had been left behind. Not knowing what to do, she kept walking. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just walked, like someone who had already expected this to happen at some point. Her father, her only point of affection, had left months earlier to try his luck as a construction worker in Miami. Since then, the woman who claimed to care for her barely disguised her impatience, as if the girl were a nuisance. Louisa knew how to recognize when she wasn't welcome. She knew she needed to keep walking, but she didn't know how far. The road seemed endless when, as evening fell, a different sound broke the silence. The engine of a pickup truck approaching. Louisa stopped, hesitant, her gaze fixed on the incandescent horizon. A man approached, driving a white, imposing-looking pickup truck dressed in a light linen shirt, straw hat, and dark glasses. He didn't look like an ordinary desert dweller. He stopped some distance away, observing the girl with an expression that mixed curiosity and concern. He said nothing immediately. He just got out of the vehicle and, with calm movements, approached. The man's name was Bernard Caldwell. "Hi, little one. What are you doing here alone?" he asked, maintaining a respectful distance. Louisa hesitated. She had learned not to trust strangers, but something in that man's gaze conveyed a serenity she rarely found in adults. "I'm waiting for my stepmother," she lied, looking at the ground. Bernard looked around. The road was completely deserted except for the two of them. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and red. "Have you been waiting long?" he asked, noticing the girl's worn sandals and tired appearance. "A little," she replied, clutching the bag to her chest. Owner of one of the largest grape and mango-producing farms in the Colorado River Valley region, Bernard was a reserved man, known for his success in agricultural businesses and for his solitary life. He had inherited part of his father's land, expanded it with wisdom and investment, and was now considered one of the most prosperous entrepreneurs in Arizona's arid heartland. Despite his fortune, he lived discreetly. Few knew about his past, and even fewer dared to ask. The presence of a child alone on that road unnerved him. Something about that girl, perhaps her eyes, perhaps the posture of someone who had already suffered more than she should have, touched him in an unexpected way. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her height. "Louisa," she replied, finally looking up. Bernard felt a strange tightness in his chest. The girl's eyes, a rare greenish-brown, stirred in him a distant and painful memory he had tried to forget for years. "Louisa, I'm Bernard. It's getting late and it doesn't look like anyone is coming to get you. Can I take you home or somewhere safe?" The girl remained silent for a few seconds, weighing her options. She had nowhere to go. She didn't want to admit she had been abandoned. "I don't know where my house is," she finally confessed, her voice almost a whisper. Bernard understood the situation more quickly than he would have liked. It wasn't the first time he had heard about abandoned children on the roads of the region. Broken families, extreme poverty, stepmothers who didn't want to raise children from previous relationships, stories that repeated with disturbing frequency. Would you like to come with me to the city police station? We might find someone there who knows your family." Upon hearing the word police station, Louisa took a step back. Her stepmother always threatened her with stories about what happened to children who were taken there. Bernard noticed the fear in her eyes. "Or perhaps you'd prefer to come with me to my ranch first. We can eat something, you can rest a bit, and then we'll decide what to do. I have trustworthy people there who can help us." The offer seemed safe. Hunger and tiredness weighed more than fear at that moment. Louisa nodded shyly. "Do you live far from here?" "Not very. My ranch is about 20 minutes away by car," Bernard replied, pointing to the pickup truck. "It's called New Hope Ranch." The name brought a small smile to the girl's parched lips. Hope. A word her mother used to repeat before falling asleep in the days when she was still present. Louisa was welcomed by him that very day. She was taken to New Hope Ranch, a green oasis in the heart of the desert, with irrigated plantations, modern farming techniques, and an imposing but welcoming main house. There she met Mrs. Iris, the housekeeper who cared for the house with almost maternal affection, and Janine, a young helper who immediately took a liking to the girl. In the first few days, Louisa was treated with a care she had never known: clean clothes, hot food, a room all to herself. But even with the comfort, the girl took time to trust. She avoided talking much, always looked at the door, and seemed to expect, deep down, that at any moment everything would disappear, like so many other good things that had been taken from her. Bernard, in turn, felt increasingly intrigued by the girl's presence. He began to discreetly investigate her origin, while trying to locate her father. He sought out the city's police chief, Lieutenant Graham. But information was scarce. Louisa didn't know her father's full name, nor the cousin he supposedly worked with in Miami. Still, the lieutenant promised to look. "Bernard, you know this isn't that simple, don't you?" Lieutenant Graham commented during a private conversation. "We need to locate the family, verify the situation. If we confirm abandonment, the girl will have to go to a shelter in Phoenix, while Child Protective Services decides what to do." "A shelter?" Bernard didn't hide his concern. He knew the precarious conditions of many institutions in the region. "It's standard procedure, unless you want to file for temporary guardianship, but that also has its complications." Bernard didn't answer immediately. The idea of taking responsibility for a child had never crossed his mind. His life was organized around work, chosen solitude, memories he preferred to keep dormant. Over time, rumors spread. People in the town started to comment. Some said the millionaire had lost his mind. Others that he was hiding some secret. But Bernard didn't let it affect him. He just observed. In silence, he felt that something in that child pulled him to a past he tried to bury. One afternoon, while watching Louisa playing in the garden with the yellow trumpet tree flowers falling from the trees, Bernard was surprised by Mrs. Iris, who approached with a cup of coffee. "She has the same way about her as Diana, doesn't she?" the housekeeper commented, referring to Bernard's deceased wife. The observation caught him off guard. Diana, his wife, had passed, away 7 years earlier, taking with her the child they were expecting. An accident on the road between Phoenix and Tucson, when they were returning from a doctor's appointment. Diana's body was found, but that of the baby, who was almost 8 months along, was never recovered due to the conditions of the accident and the river's current. A trauma Bernard carried in silence. "What do you mean by that, Iris?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "The way she looks, the way she tilts her head when she's thinking, even the way she smiles, hiding her teeth. It's just like Diana." Bernard felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't the first time he had noticed these similarities, but hearing them from someone else's mouth made it all more real, more disturbing. "They're coincidences, Iris." "Nothing more," he replied, retreating to his office. But once alone, he allowed doubt to invade him. What if... No, it was impossible. The baby hadn't survived. The doctors had been clear about that. And even if by some absurd miracle it had survived, how to explain the time? Louisa was 8 years old. The accident had happened 7 years ago. The math didn't add up. Still, there was something inexplicable connecting him to that child. That same night, while organizing old documents in the ranch office, Bernard found a small silver locket with mother-of-pearl details. It was a gift he had bought to give Diana on the day their child was born. He never had the chance to give it to her. He felt a shiver. Days later, Louisa accidentally entered the same office and, seeing the locket on the table, said her mother had one, just like it. The coincidence disturbed him. He then began to rummage through family files, his wife's records, old news about the accident, looking for any detail that might have escaped him. Meanwhile, Louisa began to open up. She ran through the ranch gardens, laughed with Janine, helped with household chores, and started calling Mrs. Iris Grandma. But with Bernard she maintained a respectful distance. She knew he was the man who had saved her, but she also perceived that there was something restrained in him, as if he held back a feeling about to explode. The bond grew, even without words. One night the girl had a strange dream. She dreamed of a woman, with curly hair and a serene smile, who cradled her in a hammock and softly sang a lullaby. Upon waking she remembered the face and drew it with colored pencils. Mrs. Iris saw the drawing and felt her heart clench. It was Diana's face, the woman who had not been mentioned in that house for years. "Who is this woman you drew, Louisa?" the housekeeper asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "I don't know. I dreamed of her. She sang me a beautiful song, something about the river and the stars." Iris felt herself pale. It was the song Diana had composed for the baby she was expecting, an original composition, which no one but the closest knew. Without revealing his suspicions to Louisa, Bernard began to observe her even more closely. Every gesture, every phrase spoken without thinking, every memory that surfaced in moments of distraction, and little by little, doubt turned into an intimate certainty. Even if nothing was officially confirmed, something between the two had already been established, a bond that required no proof of blood. "Lieutenant Graham called today," Bernard said one afternoon as they were having dinner. "He wants to talk about your situation. Louisa." The girl lowered her eyes to her plate, feeling her stomach tighten. "Are they going to send me away?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. "Not while I can help it," he replied, with a firmness that surprised them both. The next morning, Bernard drove to the police station. Lieutenant Graham received him with a serious expression. "I got some information about the girl's father," the chief said. "A man named Sebastian Foster works as a construction helper in Miami. It seems Louisa's mother passed away about 4 years ago, and he remarried about 6 months later." "And the stepmother?" "From what we've gathered, her name is Josephine Allen. She has 2 more children from another relationship. But the strangest information is about the girl." Bernard felt his heart race. "What about her?" "Her birth certificate is a bit suspicious. It was issued late when she was almost a year old and has some inconsistencies. The hospital indicated no longer exists, and the doctor who signed it is not registered with the regional board." "What does that mean?" "It might not mean anything. Many people in rural areas are still born at home without medical assistance and legalize their documents later. But it could also indicate some kind of fraud, illegal adoption, a swap." Bernard couldn't hear anymore. The chief's words seemed distant, as if coming through a tunnel. His mind worked feverishly, connecting dots, raising possibilities that until then seemed absurd. "What if—" "Bernard, are you listening to me?" "Sorry, I got distracted. What were you saying?" "I said I'll continue the investigation, but we need to decide on the girl's current situation. Child Protective Services has already been notified, and the tendency is for her to be referred to a shelter while we try to locate the father." "No," Bernard replied firmly. "I want to file for temporary guardianship. Until everything is clarified, she stays with me." The chief stared at him for a few moments, surprised by his determination. "This will raise questions, Bernard. You know how small towns work. People are already talking. I don't care what people say. That girl is not going to a shelter, and I have reasons to believe she may have a connection to my family." "What kind of connection?" Bernard hesitated. It was too soon to share his suspicions. He needed more proof, more certainty. "It's a long story, Graham, and I need to investigate more before sharing it. But for now, handle the temporary guardianship procedures. My lawyer, Dr. Emmett, will contact you today." On the way back to the ranch, Bernard drove past the old road where the accident had occurred 7 years earlier. It was a place he avoided at all costs, but that day he felt compelled to revisit it. He stopped the pickup truck and got out. The river flowed serenely now, very different from the violent flood of that fateful day. He closed his eyes, trying to order his thoughts. The doctors had said the impact was so strong that the baby could not have survived. The body was never found, carried away by the current. But what if by some improbable miracle the baby had survived? And what if someone had found it, and without knowing its origin decided to raise it? Or worse, knowing its origin, decided to hide it for some reason? When Bernard returned to the ranch, he found Louisa sitting on the porch, braiding yellow trumpet tree flowers she had picked from the ground. Seeing him, she smiled shyly. "I made a flower crown," she said, showing her work. Bernard sat beside her, observing her small, skillful hands. "It's very pretty. Where did you learn to do that?" "My mother taught me before she left," the girl replied naturally. "She used to say that flowers bring good luck, especially yellow ones." Bernard felt a lump in his throat. Diana believed in exactly the same superstition. "Louisa, do you remember your mother? What was she like?" The girl frowned, concentrating. "I remember little. She was pretty, had hair like this, curly," she said, gesturing around her own head. "And she sang to me every night. But she left when I was little. And your father never talked about how she passed away." Louisa shook her head negatively. "Father didn't like to talk about it. He would get sad. I just know she was in a car, and then she didn't come back." Bernard felt his heart pound. A car? An accident, perhaps? Coincidence or something more? "And do you remember when you had your last birthday? How old were you?" "I turned 8 last month," she replied proudly. "But we didn't celebrate. My stepmother said it was a waste of money." 8 years old. If she were really his daughter, she would be 7. But birth dates on fraudulent documents were rarely accurate. One more detail that fueled his growing suspicion. "Louisa, would you like to stay here at the ranch? With me, with Mrs. Iris and Janine, at least until we find your father?" The girl's eyes lit up for a moment, but soon the shadow of distrust returned. "And then? When they find him?" Bernard hesitated. He didn't want to promise what he might not be able to deliver. "Later, we'll see what's best for you, but in the meantime, this can be your home." Louisa looked at the ranch, at the sky painted orange by the sunset, at the flowers in her hands. Then, with a simple gesture, she extended the flower crown and placed it on Bernard's head. "Okay," she replied, with the first genuine laugh since she arrived. "Now you have good luck too." At that moment, something broke inside Bernard. The barrier that kept his emotions under control silently crumbled. He didn't know if that girl was really his daughter, if the age math made sense, if his theory was just the delusion of a man marked by loss. But he knew with a certainty that came from the depths of his soul that Louisa had come to fill a void he didn't even know how to name. To those who saw from outside, it was the improbable story of a poor girl found on the road by a rich and solitary rancher. But for Bernard, it was more than that. It was the chance to rebuild what he never thought possible. For Louisa, it was the beginning of a life where she could finally be a child. What no one knew yet was how far this connection would take them, what lay behind that road, that abandonment, and the decision of a man who no longer believed in new beginnings. Mysteries accumulated. The suspicious birth certificate, the mother-of-pearl locket, Louisa's dreams of a woman she never knew, the song she shouldn't know, the greenish-brown eyes, so rare, so familiar, and there was still the biological father, Sebastian, who needed to be found. What would his version of this story be? Had he been deceived too? Or was he part of a larger, darker scheme? The wind blew stronger, carrying some yellow petals through the air. Louisa watched them dance against the orange sky. "They look like falling stars," she commented dreamily. "They do," Bernard agreed, feeling for the first time in years truly at peace. That night, while the girl slept, he made an important call to his lawyer, Dr. Emmett. He needed more information about the accident 7 years ago, about the hospital records, about every detail of that day that had changed his life forever. Something told him that the answers were closer than he imagined, and this time he wouldn't rest until he found them. The full moon illuminated New Hope Ranch as Bernard watched the sky from the porch. Somewhere in Miami, a man named Sebastian might be wondering about his stepdaughter's whereabouts. Or perhaps not. Somewhere in the past, a truth awaited to be unearthed. And, in the next room, Louisa slept peacefully for the first time in a long time, unaware that her destiny was about to take a turn no one could predict. In the following weeks, New Hope Ranch gained a life it hadn't known for a long time. Louisa's presence brought movement to the once silent corridors, laughter to the once melancholic garden. Mrs. Iris, who had served the Caldwell family for over 3 decades, watched with tear-filled eyes the transformation not only of the house but especially of her employer. Bernard, always reserved and methodical, now spent more time out of the office. He could be seen teaching Louisa to ride a horse, to identify the types of fruits on the ranch, to read the stories he himself enjoyed as a child. It was as if the girl's presence had opened a window in a room closed for years, letting in light and fresh air. But not everything was rosy. The shadow of the investigation hung over them, along with the uncertainty of the future. "Do you think they'll find my father?" Louisa asked one afternoon, while they were picking mangoes in the orchard. Bernard felt his stomach clench. The question he had tried to avoid had finally surfaced. "It's possible," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "Lieutenant Graham is looking. Do you really want to find him?" Louisa was silent for an instant, contemplating the fruit in her hands. "Sometimes yes, sometimes no," she confessed. "I like him, but he never had much time for me. And after he married Mrs. Josephine, it seemed like I had become a problem." "You are never a problem, Louisa," Bernard said firmly, crouching down to her height. "Never think that about yourself." The girl smiled shyly, but soon became serious again. "If they find him, will I have to leave here?" It was the question that also kept Bernard awake at night. "I don't know, little one. Legally, he is your guardian, but I promise that no matter what happens, I will do everything to ensure you are well and happy." It was not an empty promise. In recent days, Bernard had intensified his investigations parallel to those of the chief. He had hired a private investigator, Ronald Silver, specialized in cases of disappearance and identity fraud. The man was already in Miami, following leads on Sebastian Foster and searching hospital records from 7 years ago. That same night, Ronald called with the first discoveries. "I found this Sebastian fellow, boss," he reported. "He works as a construction helper for a company in South Beach. I talked to some of his colleagues, pretending to look for labor. From what I gathered, he really did have a daughter living with him and his current wife, but it seems the girl went to live with relatives in the countryside about a month ago. He abandoned his own daughter and made up that story for his acquaintances," Bernard concluded, feeling a mix of indignation and secretly relief. If the biological father had indeed abandoned Louisa, it would be easier to obtain guardianship. "There's one more interesting thing," Ronald continued. "I went to the registry office where the girl's birth certificate was issued. As you suspected, the document was issued when she was almost a year old. And the doctor who signed it, Dr. Paul Miller, is indeed not listed in the regional medical board records, but I found a retired nurse with that name who worked at St. Jude's Hospital for almost 30 years. St. Jude's Hospital? Bernard felt his heart race. It was exactly where Diana had done her prenatal care. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to locate him, but I've already found out he moved to a town in the high desert Flagstaff. I'm going there first thing tomorrow." "Excellent work, Ronald. Keep me informed of any news." After hanging up, Bernard sat in his favorite armchair on the porch overlooking the Colorado River. The night was clear, the sky full of stars, the river reflecting the moon like a silver mirror. In moments like this, he felt Diana's presence more strongly. They used to sit there together, planning the future, dreaming of their child's arrival. His thoughts were interrupted by light footsteps. Louisa appeared on the porch, dressed in floral cotton pajamas that Janine had bought in town. "Can't sleep," Bernard asked. She shook her head negatively, rubbing her eyes. I had a strange dream again, with the curly-haired woman. Bernard felt a shiver. Louisa's dreams of Diana were becoming more frequent. Do you want to tell me about the dream? Louisa sat beside him, folding her legs onto the seat of the rocking chair. We were in a car. She was driving and singing. Then it started to rain very hard, and she got scared. The car started to dance on the road, as if it were skidding. Then she screamed, and I woke up. Bernard felt his blood freeze in his veins. It was a disturbingly accurate description of the accident, at least of what he imagined had happened. How could Louisa know these details? It was just a nightmare, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. You are safe here. Who is she, Mr. Bernard? Why does she appear in my dreams? The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Bernard wasn't ready to answer. He didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. Telling his suspicions could create unnecessary hopes or fears in the girl. Sometimes we dream of people we've never met, but who are somehow important, he replied, choosing his words carefully. When we find out who she is, I'll tell you. I promise. Louisa seemed satisfied with the answer. She looked at the river, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. Do you know what she told me in the dream before the rain started? The girl asked. She said, Don't be afraid, my little trumpet tree. You will grow strong and fill the world with flowers. Just like those trees in the garden. Little trumpet tree. The nickname Diana had chosen for the baby still in her womb. Bernard felt his eyes sting with the tears he tried to hold back. It was impossible for Louisa to know that. Impossible unless... That's a beautiful nickname, he managed to say, his voice slightly choked. Are you crying? Louisa asked, observing him with curiosity. No, it's just something in my eye, he lied, discreetly wiping away a stubborn tear. It's late, you should go back to bed. Can I stay a little longer? I like to look at the river at night. It looks like a silver path. Exactly as Diana described. One more impossible coincidence. Just a little longer, then. They remained in silence, observing the river and the stars. Bernard immersed in his increasingly strong suspicions, Louisa lost in childish thoughts that somehow connected to memories that shouldn't be hers. After a few minutes, the girl's head drooped to the side and she fell asleep in the swing. Carefully, Bernard picked her up and carried her to her room, covering her with the light sheet. He observed her serene little face for a moment, noticing once again the subtle similarities, the curve of her chin, the shape of her eyebrows, her delicate nose. Traces of Diana, perhaps even his own traces, mixed in a combination that defied reason and ignited hope. The next morning, an unexpected visit arrived at the ranch. Lieutenant Graham appeared accompanied by a middle-aged woman, formally dressed with a briefcase in her hand. Bernard received them in his office, apprehensive. This is Dr. Clara Middleton from Phoenix Child Protective Services, the chief introduced. She came to verify the girl's conditions and to better understand the circumstances of how she came to be here. Good morning, Mr. Caldwell, the woman greeted seriously. I need to assess the situation of the minor under your temporary guardianship and better understand the circumstances of how she came to be here. Of course, please make yourself at home, Bernard replied, maintaining his composure. Louisa is with Mrs. Iris in the kitchen making cheese puffs. I can call her if you prefer. First, I'd like to speak with you. Lieutenant Graham informed me about the suspicions of abandonment, but also mentioned that you have a theory about the girl's true identity. Could you explain? Bernard shot a questioning look at the chief, who shrugged. She needed to know everything, Bernard. It's part of her job. After a moment of hesitation, Bernard decided to share his suspicions. He told about the accident 7 years ago, about the pregnant wife he had lost, about the disturbing coincidences, the locket, the dreams, the nickname Little Trumpet Tree, the physical similarities. I know it sounds crazy, he concluded. The age difference doesn't match. If she were my daughter, she would be 7, not 8. But records can be falsified, dates can be altered, and there's something about her, something I can't rationally explain, that tells me there's a connection. Dr. Clara listened attentively, taking some notes. Mr. Caldwell, with all due respect, This seems more like your desire to recover your lost family than a real possibility, she said, gently but firmly. I understand your pain, but we need to think about the child's well-being first. Have you told her about these suspicions? No, he replied emphatically. I would never create expectations without having certainties. I am investigating discreetly. I hired a private investigator who is following some important leads. That is irregular, sir. Any investigation should go through official channels. Excuse me, Dr. Middleton, Lieutenant Graham intervened. I've known Bernard for years. He's no obsessed lunatic. If he hired an investigator, it's because he truly believes he has reasons. And to be honest, after everything he told me, I also became intrigued by the coincidences. The social worker sighed. In any case, I need to assess the child's current situation. See where she sleeps, how she is, treated if she is attending school. I haven't enrolled her in school yet, Bernard admitted. We were waiting for the legal situation to become clearer. But I hired a private tutor, Edwina Stone, who comes 3 times a week. She can confirm Louisa's progress if necessary. I'll need to speak with that tutor as well, Dr. Clara said, writing down the name. And now, if possible, I'd like to speak with the girl alone. Bernard felt a tightness in his chest. He knew it was standard procedure, but the idea of Louisa being questioned made him anxious. What if they asked about the dreams? What if she mentioned the nickname Little Trumpet Tree? It could be interpreted as manipulation on his part. Of course I'll call her, he said, standing up, but I ask that you be sensitive. She has been through a lot recently. As he walked to the kitchen, Bernard tried to organize his thoughts. He needed to trust that Louisa would be fine, that the social worker's visit was just a formality. After all, the girl was well cared for, had a roof over her head, food, education, affection. What could go wrong? In the kitchen, Louisa and Mrs. Iris were shaping small balls of cheese puff dough. The delicious smell filled the air. Seeing Bernard, the girl smiled, showing her flour-covered hands. Look, Mr. Bernard, I did everything just like Grandma Iris taught me. His heart ached. How to tell her there was a woman in the office who could determine her future. You're doing a great job, little one, he said, forcing a smile, but I need you to come with me for a moment. There's someone who wants to talk to you. Louisa's smile disappeared instantly, replaced by an expression of alarm. Is it my father? Did he come to get me? No, it's not your father, he quickly replied. It's a lady who helps children. She just wants to meet you, ask you some questions about how you're feeling here. Louisa looked at Mrs. Iris, as if seeking confirmation that everything was all right. Go on, my flower, the housekeeper said with a reassuring smile. When you come back, we'll finish our cheese puffs and put them in the oven. Reluctantly, Louisa wiped her hands on a dish towel and followed Bernard down the hallway. Before they entered the office, he crouched down to her height. Louisa, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will always be here for you. If you need anything, just call me. Okay. The girl nodded, but her eyes revealed an old fear, the fear of another abandonment, another loss. Bernard felt a pang of guilt. He couldn't promise what didn't entirely depend on him. The interview with Dr. Clara lasted almost an hour. Bernard and Lieutenant Graham waited on the porch, trying to maintain a casual conversation that disguised their mutual anxiety. Finally, the door opened, and the social worker appeared with Louisa. The girl's expression was unreadable. Louisa, why don't you go finish your cheese puffs? Dr. Clara suggested with a gentle smile. I'm sure they'll be delicious. As soon as the girl walked away, the social worker turned to Bernard. She seems well adapted, Mr. Caldwell. She speaks of you and the house with evident affection. She shows no signs of abuse or neglect. On the contrary, she appears well nourished and cared for. Bernard released the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. So, I will recommend maintaining temporary guardianship while investigations into the biological father continue, she said. However, we need to regularize her school situation immediately. Private tutors are great, but socialization is also important. I understand, Bernard agreed, relieved. I will arrange her enrollment this week at St. Christopher's Elementary School. It's the best in the region. There's one more thing, Dr. Clara added, now in a more serious tone. The girl mentioned recurring dreams about a woman she never knew. She said you know who this woman is, but haven't told her. Is that true? Bernard felt his stomach drop. Yes, I have a suspicion, as I've explained, but I don't want to confuse her without having certainties. I understand your concern, the social worker said, closing her briefcase, but children are more resilient than we imagine. Sometimes uncertainty is more disturbing than the truth, even when it's difficult. Think about it. After the visitors left, Bernard returned to his office and immediately called Ronald. He needed answers, and fast. Any news about the nurse, Paul Miller? I'm in Flagstaff now, boss, the investigator replied. I located his address. It's a ranch on the outskirts of town. I'm going to visit him this afternoon, pretending to do research on the history of hospitals in the region. Excellent. And what about Sebastian Foster? I managed to talk to him yesterday. I posed as a social worker investigating a benefit his ex-wife might be entitled to. He confirmed that the girl went to live with relatives, but he became visibly uncomfortable when I asked for details. I'm almost certain he's lying, and there's more. I found out he receives a monthly pension in the child's name from a government social program, so he's still pocketing the money, even though he abandoned the girl. That's revolting, Bernard said, feeling his indignation grow, but it could be useful for our case. Keep investigating, Ronald, and keep me informed about your conversation with Paul Miller. After hanging up, Bernard went to the kitchen, where the aroma of freshly baked cheese puffs filled the air. Louisa, Mrs. Iris, and Janine were sitting at the table, tasting their creation. Seeing him, the girl gave a genuine smile. Come try, Mr. Bernard. We saved the prettiest ones for you. He joined them, accepting a still steaming cheese puff. The familiar taste brought momentary comfort. It's delicious, you're excellent cooks, he praised. Louisa did almost all of it, Mrs. Iris said with a proud look. She has good hands for cooking, just like... The housekeeper abruptly stopped, realizing she was about to mention Diana. Bernard gave her a warning look. Just like who, Grandma? Louisa asked, curious. Just like many talented young women I've known, the old woman deflected. You have a natural gift, my flower. That afternoon, while Louisa had her lesson with her tutor Edwina, Bernard took the opportunity to put the social worker's advice into practice. He enrolled the girl in St. Christopher's Elementary School for the school year that would begin in 2 weeks. He felt strangely emotional filling out the forms as her legal guardian. It was an important step, something he had never imagined doing. He also bought all the necessary school supplies, notebooks, pencils, backpack, uniform. He wanted Louisa to have the best of everything, never again to feel the privations she had known before. Upon returning to the ranch, he found a surprise. Dr. Emmett's car, his lawyer, was parked at the entrance. The middle-aged man, always elegant in his impeccable suits, awaited him in the office. Emmett, I wasn't expecting your visit, Bernard said, extending his hand to greet him. I came personally because the matter is delicate. My friend, the lawyer replied, his face revealing concern. I received a call from the Phoenix County Courthouse. Sebastian Foster has filed a petition for the search and seizure of his daughter. Bernard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. How? But he abandoned her. How dare he? According to the petition, he did not abandon the girl. He claims he left her temporarily in the care of her stepmother, who was supposed to take the child to an aunt's house in Tucson. He says his wife was the one who abandoned the girl without his knowledge or consent, and that upon discovering what happened, he immediately began searching. It's a lie, Bernard exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. We have witnesses that the stepmother left Louisa alone on the road. The problem is they are indirect witnesses. No one saw the act itself, only the girl walking alone afterward. And legally, Bernard, he is the father. He has preference for custody. Bernard ran a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. Can't we contest that? I have evidence that he continues to receive benefits in the girl's name, even after the supposed disappearance. Doesn't that constitute fraud? Yes, and we will use that. I'm already preparing our defense, but I need to be honest. If we don't have more conclusive proof of neglect or abuse, it will be difficult to prevent him from regaining custody. And what about my suspicion? If Louisa is really my daughter, the lawyer sighed. Bernard, you know I have great affection for you. I've worked for your family for decades, but this theory, it needs much more than coincidences and dreams to hold up in court. We need scientific documentary evidence, a DNA test, for example. And can we request that? A DNA test? We can try, but we need a plausible basis for the judge to authorize it. Your suspicion alone isn't enough. We need some concrete indication that raises doubts about the biological paternity. Bernard remembered Ronald's investigations. What if we discover that her birth certificate is fraudulent, that the doctor who signed it was actually a retired nurse who might have been involved in some illegal scheme? Emmett's eyes widened. That would completely change the game. If we can prove documentary fraud, the judge will certainly order deeper investigations, including a DNA test. My investigator is currently pursuing those very proofs. Then let's pray he finds them quickly. The preliminary hearing has been scheduled for 10 days from now. 10 days. An absurdly short deadline to unravel a 7-year mystery. Bernard felt the weight of pressure on his shoulders. And until then, do I have to hand Louisa over? No. Temporary guardianship remains with you until the court decision. But be prepared, Bernard. Sebastian will come with his lawyer, and from what I've heard, he has gained support from the Separated Parents' Rights Association. They are treating the case as an example of parental alienation. Alienation, but that's absurd. I found her abandoned. I know, but his narrative is powerful. A hard-working father of humble origin against a rich rancher who supposedly appropriated his daughter. We need to be very careful. After the lawyer left, Bernard remained in the office, trying to absorb everything he had heard. The mere idea of Louisa being taken back to the man who had abandoned her filled him with a despair he had never felt before. He could not allow it, he would not allow it, even if he had to fight with all his might. The phone rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. It was Ronald. "Boss, I found Paul Miller." And he talked. He talked a lot. Bernard felt his heart pound. What did he say? He confirms he was never a doctor, just a nurse. He says that after retiring, a man approached him offering money to sign fake birth certificates. He signed several over a few years for children born at home or in other circumstances. What other circumstances? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Illegally adopted children, boss. Some from mothers who didn't want their children, others, well, he didn't want to go into detail, but he implied that not all adoptions were exactly consensual. Bernard felt a chill run down his spine. And what about Louisa? Does he remember her specifically? Not by name, but when I described the circumstances, the approximate date, he became agitated. He said there was one case that disturbed him more than the others. A baby who, according to the intermediary, had been found after an accident on the road between Phoenix and Tucson, still with vital signs. The world seemed to freeze around Bernard, the road between Phoenix and Tucson. The same stretch where Diana had suffered the accident. Is he sure about this? Absolutely sure? He said he never forgot, because it was the only case where he actually saw the baby personally. A newborn girl, premature, who seemed a miracle to have survived. The intermediary wanted him to examine the child, ensure she was well before handing her over to the new family. Does he know who this family was? Who was the intermediary? He only knew the intermediary as Mustache Joe, a suspicious character who lived off petty schemes in the region. As for the family, he only knows they were simple people from the countryside. And boss, yeah, there's one more thing. The nurse said the baby had a peculiar birthmark, a small crescent-shaped mark behind her right ear. Bernard almost dropped the phone. A crescent-shaped mark, exactly like the one his son was supposed to have, a family trait that he himself possessed, as did his father and grandfather before him. Louisa has that mark, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I thought it was a coincidence, something common. It seems we've found our connection, boss. We need him to testify, Ronald. It's crucial. I'm already working on that. He's scared, obviously. He knows he committed a crime, but I think I can convince him, especially if we guarantee some kind of immunity. Talk to Dr. Emmett. He'll know what to do. And Ronald, thank you. After hanging up, Bernard felt a confused mix of emotions, elation, anger, hope, fear. If all of this were true, and the evidence pointed increasingly in that direction. Louisa was indeed his daughter, his and Diana's, the baby he had believed lost in the accident 7 years ago. But this also meant that someone, this mustached Joe, had taken advantage of the tragedy. He had found the baby still alive and, instead of seeking official medical help, had chosen to hand her over for illegal adoption, probably in exchange for money. And Sebastian? What was his role in all of this? Had he merely been the innocent recipient of a child he believed to be legally adopted, or did he know about the illegal circumstances? Most likely, Bernard thought, Sebastian truly believed he was Louisa's father. Perhaps the biological mother, now deceased, had hidden the truth, or perhaps both knew about the illegal adoption, but not necessarily the tragic origin of the child. Lost in these thoughts, Bernard didn't notice Louisa's silent approach. He only became aware of her presence when she spoke. "Mr. Bernard, can I ask you something?" He turned, startled, trying to disguise the emotional storm consuming him. "Of course, little one, what is it?" "Tutor Edwina showed me a book about families today. It had all kinds of families. Mom and dad, just mom, just dad, 2 dads, 2 moms, grandparents raising grandchildren." She paused, biting her lower lip. "And I kept thinking, are we a family? You, me, Grandma Iris, and Janine?" The question, so simple and so profound, caught Bernard off guard. He felt his eyes well up. "Yes, Louisa," he replied without hesitation. "We are a family. In a different way, perhaps, but we are. Even without a paper that says so. Sometimes what we feel is more important than any paper. But—" he hesitated, knowing he couldn't hide everything from her, especially now. "We are trying to get those papers too, so that no one can ever say otherwise." Louisa smiled, her eyes lighting up with genuine happiness. "So can I call you Dad? It doesn't have to be now, only when we have the papers." Bernard felt his heart break and mend in the same instant. He wanted to say yes, he wanted to hug her and tell her the whole truth. But it was still too early. There were still battles to win. "When we have the papers," he agreed, trying to control the emotion in his voice. "And until then, how about you just call me Bernard without the Mr.? Friends don't need so much formality." Louisa nodded, satisfied with the compromise. She came closer and, in a spontaneous gesture she had never made before, hugged him. Bernard wrapped her in his arms, feeling a certainty that transcended any DNA test. This was his daughter, and he would do anything to keep her safe, to give her the life she deserved. As he hugged her, he looked out the office window. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Over the river, a white heron flew elegantly, free and determined. What would happen from then on, no one could predict. But of one thing Bernard was sure. The truth would come out as it always does, even if it took years, even if it demanded sacrifices. And when that happened, nothing else could separate what destiny so improbably had reunited. Louisa seemed satisfied with the explanation. She looked back at the river, now fuller due to the rain. "There's one thing I never told you about my dreams," she said softly. "In the last one, the woman called me a different name." Bernard felt his heart race. "What name?" he asked, almost voiceless. "Yara," Louisa replied. "She called me my little Yara. It's pretty, isn't it?" Bernard had to hold onto the bench to keep from falling. Yara, the name he and Diana had chosen for their daughter. A name they had never shared with anyone except Mrs. Iris and the doctor who had done the prenatal care. "It's very beautiful," he managed to reply, his voice choked. "Do you know what it means?" Louisa shook her head negatively. "Yara is the Lady of the Waters in indigenous folklore," he explained. "A figure, mistress of rivers and lakes, protector of nature. Your mother." Diana loved that legend. She used to say that our daughter would be free and strong like the waters of the Colorado River. "So I would be Yara if she hadn't left?" Bernard nodded, unable to speak. Tears streamed freely down his face now, without any attempt to hide them. "Do you like Louisa or Yara better?" he asked, when he finally regained his voice. The girl thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I like both," she replied simply. "Can I be Louisa Yara?" "You can be whatever you want, little one," Bernard said, enveloping her in a tight hug. "A name is just a part of who we are. What's important is what we carry inside." They stayed like that, embraced, watching the rain subside and the river continue its eternal course. Father and daughter reunited by forces beyond human comprehension, by destiny, by perseverance, by love that transcends even death. The next morning, as promised, a laboratory team arrived at the ranch to collect material for the DNA test. The procedure was simple: a swab passed on the inside of the cheek for both Bernard and Louisa. In 3 days, they would have scientific confirmation of what their hearts already knew. While awaiting the results, life at New Hope Ranch took on a new routine. Louisa began attending St. Christopher's Elementary School, where she quickly made friends and impressed her teachers with her intelligence and creativity. Bernard, in turn, gradually resumed his businesses, which he had neglected in recent weeks due to the legal process. On a particularly hot afternoon, Janine brought up an idea that cheered everyone up. "Why don't we take advantage of this waiting time to redecorate Louisa's room?" she suggested. "We can paint it the color she chooses, buy new furniture, make it a space truly hers." "That's a wonderful idea," Bernard agreed. "What do you think, Louisa?" The girl, who until then had been using one of the guest rooms, brightened at the possibility. "Can I really choose any color?" "Anyone," Bernard assured. "And we can go to Phoenix to choose the furniture and decorations. It will be your special little corner in the house." The next day, everyone piled into the pickup truck. Bernard, Louisa, Mrs. Iris, and Janine. The outing had a dual purpose: to distract themselves from the anxiety over the test results and to begin preparations for the new phase of their lives. At the hardware store, Louisa chose a soft shade of blue for the walls, "the color of the sky, when it's calm," as she explained. At the furniture store, she opted for a canopy bed, a study desk, and a bookshelf, all in light wood. Bernard watched her choices with a mixture of pride and emotion. There was a delicacy, an aesthetic sense in that child that certainly came from Diana. "Look, Bernard," Louisa exclaimed, running to a decorating section. "Aren't they beautiful?" They were star-shaped lamps that projected constellations onto the ceiling when lit. Bernard immediately remembered how Diana loved to observe the night sky, how she knew the name of every constellation. "They're perfect," he agreed. "Let's take them." The outing ended at an ice cream parlor in the city center, where Louisa savored a huge chocolate sundae, her favorite. Sitting at the table, watching her laugh with Janine over some inside joke, Bernard felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. Whatever the test result, this was his family now, and nothing would change that. Upon returning to the ranch in the late afternoon, they were greeted by Lieutenant Graham, who was waiting on the porch with a serious expression. "Has something happened?" Bernard asked, immediately alert. "Yes and no," the chief replied, enigmatically. "I received some information that I thought you would want to know immediately." Bernard asked Mrs. Iris to take Louisa inside while he spoke with the visitor. "What's wrong?" he asked, as soon as the girl was out of earshot. "It's about Josiah, Mustache Joe. He's in custody, as you know, but he made an important revelation today. He said he didn't act alone that night. There was another man with him, someone who helped him remove the child and convinced him not to seek medical help." "Who?" Bernard asked, feeling a chill run down his spine. "A doctor named Eugene Mason. He was returning from a shift in Tucson, saw the accident and stopped. According to Josiah, it was he who performed the emergency procedure that saved the baby." Bernard felt his blood run cold. Eugene Mason. He knew that name. He was one of the doctors who had attended Diana at the hospital after the accident, one of those who had signed the death certificate. "He declared my wife and my son as fatalities," Bernard murmured, his voice trembling with rage. "He knew the baby was alive. He knew all along." "Exactly," Lieutenant Graham confirmed. "And from what?" "Josiah says it was his idea to hand the child over for illegal adoption. He said it would be less complicated for everyone, including for the baby, who would have a new family instead of a grieving father." "Where is he now?" Bernard asked, barely containing the fury that swelled within him. "That's what I came to inform you. He left the country 2 days ago as soon as he heard about the arrests. We have information that he boarded a flight to Spain. We've already issued an international alert, but it will take time to bring him back if we even manage to." Bernard stood abruptly, pacing the porch like a caged animal. "He will pay for this," he said through clenched teeth, "even if I have to go after him personally." "Calm down, Bernard," the chief advised. "Justice is not revenge. We are following all legal procedures. He will be extradited and will answer for his crimes. The most important thing now is that you have your daughter back, isn't it?" Lieutenant Graham's words struck Bernard like a cold shower, momentarily calming his rage. He was right. The most important thing was Louisa, her safety, her well-being. The rest were details that time would take care of. "You're right," he agreed after a moment. "Thank you for informing me, Graham. If you learn anything else—" "You'll be the first to know," the chief assured, standing to leave. "And, Bernard, congratulations. Few people get a chance at a new beginning like this." That night, after dinner, Bernard helped Louisa with her homework. She was learning about the water cycle in school and needed to make an illustrative poster. As they colored the drawing together, he found himself observing every detail of her, how she lightly bit her lip when concentrating, exactly as Diana used to do, how she tilted her head to the side when evaluating her work, how she smiled with genuine pleasure at the final result. "It's beautiful," he praised when they finished. "You are very talented." "You too," she replied, pointing to the part of the drawing he had colored. "Has it been a long time since you drew?" "A very long time," Bernard admitted, realizing that he hadn't, in fact, engaged in creative activities since the accident. "But I think I'm relearning." "Me too," Louisa said, arranging the colored pencils in the box. "I'm relearning to be happy." The simplicity and depth of the observation left Bernard speechless. That was exactly what was happening to both of them, a process of relearning, of rediscovering the happiness they believed lost forever. "Tomorrow afternoon, we should receive the test result," he commented, changing the subject. "Are you anxious?" Louisa thought for a moment before answering. "A little, but I'm not scared." "Why?" "Because I already know what it will say," she replied, with the unwavering certainty of children. "It will say we are a real family." "I feel it here," she added, placing her hand over her heart. Bernard felt his eyes well up. Louisa's intuition, so pure and direct, was more powerful than any science. "I feel it too," he said, covering her hand with his. "Since the first day, since I saw you on that road." The next morning, Bernard received an unexpected call. It was Dr. Emmett, his lawyer. "The results are in, Bernard," he informed, his voice tense. "The lab just sent them to Judge Harrison." "And?" Bernard asked, his heart pounding. "He wants to see us immediately in his chambers, all of us. You, Louisa, me, Sebastian's lawyer, I don't know." What it means? Bernard felt a sudden tightness in his chest. Why did the judge want to see them personally? Couldn't they just send the results? Was something wrong? "We're on our way," he said, hanging up. He called Mrs. Iris and explained the situation. The housekeeper immediately helped Louisa get ready, while Bernard tried to control the anxiety that threatened to consume him. An hour later, they were back at the Phoenix County Courthouse, waiting in the hallway in front of Judge Harrison's chambers. Sebastian was already there, accompanied by his lawyer. He seemed as nervous as Bernard, though for different reasons. When their eyes met, Sebastian lowered his head, avoiding contact. "Don't worry," Dr. Emmett whispered to Bernard. "Whatever the result, we have a strong case. Definitive custody is practically certain, considering the circumstances of the abandonment." Bernard nodded, but they both knew that it wasn't just custody that was at stake. It was the confirmation of a miracle, of a story that defied all odds. Finally, they were called inside. Judge Harrison's chambers were spacious, with bookshelves covering the walls and a large dark wooden table in the center. The magistrate awaited them standing, with a sealed envelope in his hands. His face revealed nothing. "Gentlemen, I thank you all for your presence," he began formally. "As you know, I requested you come personally because the extraordinary nature of this case deserves more than a simple written communication. Furthermore, I have some considerations to make before revealing the results of the DNA test." He paused, adjusting his glasses, and then continued. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have never witnessed a case like this. A child who miraculously survives an accident is removed from the scene by ill-intentioned individuals, given up for illegal adoption, raised for years under a false identity, abandoned on a road, and finally found by her own biological father, who believed her lost forever. If I read this in a book, I would consider it implausible fiction." He looked directly at Louisa, who held Bernard's hand tightly, and his austere face softened slightly. "Little Louisa, or perhaps I should say little Yara, you are the center of an incredible story. A story of loss, of separation, but also of reunion and hope. Do you know why we are all here today?" Louisa nodded solemnly. "To find out if Bernard is my real father," she replied with a simplicity that moved everyone. "Exactly," the judge confirmed, "and the results of that test are in this envelope." He held it up, still sealed, and looked at the lawyers. "Before opening it, I want to make it clear that, regardless of the outcome, my decision on permanent custody will primarily consider the child's well-being. The testimonies collected, the social worker's observations, and the evident affective bond already established will be determining factors." He then turned to Sebastian. "Mr. Foster, I understand that you were, to some extent, also a victim in this situation. Deceived by your ex-wife about the child's origins. You genuinely believed you were her father for years. However, this does not justify the abandonment or the subsequent attempt to gain financial advantage. These actions will have legal consequences, although your spontaneous confession and apparent remorse are mitigating factors." Sebastian lowered his head, visibly embarrassed. "As for Mr. Caldwell," the judge continued, turning to Bernard, "your persistence and faith are admirable. Many would have ignored the coincidences, attributing them to chance. You followed your intuition, and that brought us to this extraordinary moment." Finally, with a solemn gesture, the judge opened the envelope and extracted a sheet of paper. He read it in silence for a few moments, his face remaining impassive. Then he looked directly at Bernard and Louisa. "The result of the DNA test indicates, with 99.9999% certainty, that Bernard Caldwell is the biological father of the child currently known as Louisa Foster, born approximately 8 years ago, under circumstances consistent with the accident that claimed the life of Diana Caldwell." An absolute silence fell over the room. Bernard felt as if the whole world had stopped. It was true, it was really true. Louisa, his Yara, was his daughter. The daughter he had believed lost forever. "Daddy!" Louisa exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms with tears in her eyes. "I knew it! I knew it all along!" Bernard hugged her tightly, unable to contain his own tears. At that moment, 7 years of pain, grief, and emptiness were replaced by a joy so intense it barely fit in his chest. Judge Harrison cleared his throat discreetly, moved despite his usual restraint. "In light of this result and all the circumstances of the case, I determined that permanent custody of the minor be granted to her biological father, Bernard Caldwell. I further determined the rectification of her civil registry so that her true name and filiation appear: Yara Louisa Caldwell, daughter of Bernard Caldwell and Diana Caldwell." He paused, as if to give weight to his next words. "As for the crimes committed in this case," he continued, "they will be dealt with in separate proceedings. Mr. Josiah Pierce and Dr. Eugene Mason will be charged with concealment of a surviving person, falsification of public documents, and other pertinent offenses. Mr. Sebastian Foster will be charged with Social Security fraud, albeit with mitigating circumstances due to his cooperation." He looked at everyone present one by one and concluded, "This case reminds us that justice at times operates through mysterious paths. That destiny, or God, or whatever force you believe in, has surprising ways of correcting wrongs. And that, as my grandmother used to say, what's truly meant for one no force can take away." As they left the chambers, Bernard and Louisa, now officially Yara Louisa, were greeted by Mrs. Iris, who was anxiously waiting in the hallway. Seeing their radiant faces, The housekeeper didn't need words to understand. She opened her arms and the three merged into an emotional embrace. "It's done," Bernard said, his voice choked. "She is officially our Yara." "She always was," Mrs. Iris replied, wiping away tears. "We were just waiting for the rest of the world to realize." Before leaving the courthouse, they were surprised by Sebastian, who approached hesitantly. "Can I speak with you for a minute?" he asked, visibly nervous. Bernard nodded, instinctively placing a hand on Yara Louisa's shoulder in a protective gesture. "I just wanted to apologize again," Sebastian said, avoiding looking directly at them. "I made many mistakes. With the girl, with you. I thought I could make some easy money, but now I see that's priceless. What you have is too special." "I appreciate your words," Bernard replied formally. Sebastian then crouched down to Yara Louisa's height. "Forgive me, little one. I wasn't the father you deserved, but I'm happy you found your real father. He will give you everything I couldn't." The girl watched him for a moment, her eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond her age. "It's okay, Mr. Sebastian," she finally said. "Life is sometimes complicated for everyone. I hope you find good things too." The man smiled sadly, touched by the childlike generosity. He gave Bernard a brief nod and walked away, carrying the weight of his choices and the lightness of an unexpected forgiveness. At the exit of the courthouse, a surprise awaited the newly officialized family. Janine, who had stayed at the ranch, had organized a small celebration. Bernard's pickup truck was decorated with colorful ribbons and a sign that read, "Officially welcome Yara Louisa." And she wasn't alone. Several ranch employees, Lieutenant Graham, tutor Edwina, even the social worker Dr. Clara, and some of Yara Louisa's school friends were there, applauding and throwing flower petals. "Is all this for me?" the girl asked, marveling. "All for you, my daughter," Bernard replied, the word daughter sounding for the first time on his lips with all the strength and joy it deserved. "And for the new beginning of our family." The drive back to New Hope Ranch was filled with laughter, songs, and a sense of fulfillment that none of them had experienced before. The desert, always so harsh and relentless, seemed to smile at them now, with its vibrant colors under the setting sun. Upon arrival, another surprise. The room they had started to redecorate was completely transformed. The walls were already painted in the shade of blue chosen by Yara Louisa, the new furniture was assembled and organized, and the star lamps hung from the ceiling, ready to turn the room into a starry sky when night fell. "How did you manage it?" Bernard asked, astonished, to Janine. "Many hands make light work," she replied, smiling. "Everyone wanted to help. It's too beautiful a story not to celebrate." The impromptu party lasted until dusk. There was cake, music, dancing, and stories told by the elders about how the desert always kept its miracles for those who knew how to look. Finally, when the guests left and silence returned to the ranch, Bernard found himself again on the porch, contemplating the starry sky, exactly as he had done so many times since the accident. But now, for the first time in 7 years, he was not alone with his memories. Yara Louisa, already in her pajamas, came to sit beside him, bringing with her a small photo album that Mrs. Iris had set aside for her. "Look, I found pictures of her," the girl said, pointing to an image of Diana smiling in front of the ranch house. "That was your mother," Bernard confirmed, feeling a sweet melancholy. "The most beautiful and special woman I ever knew." "Would she like me?" Yara Louisa asked, with a touch of insecurity. "She loved you more than anything in the world," Bernard replied, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Even before you were born, she talked to you in her belly, sang to you, dreamed of the day she could see you, hug you, teach you all the things she knew." "How do you know she would like me now?" the girl insisted. "I grew up, I changed." Bernard smiled, touched by the typically childlike doubt. "Because I know you now and I love you exactly as you are," he answered simply, "and your mother and I always agreed on everything that truly mattered." Yara Louisa seemed satisfied with the answer. She continued flipping through the album, absorbing every detail of the woman she now knew to be her biological mother. In one of the photos, Diana appeared on the same porch where they were now, looking at the river, one hand resting on her already visible belly under her dress. Was she pregnant with me here? She was, Bernard confirmed. This photo was taken a few weeks before the accident. She loved this place. She used to say that the river's energy nourished her, made her stronger. I like the river too, Yara Luisa said, looking at the silver current under the moonlight. It seems like it tells stories if you know how to listen. Your mother used to say exactly the same thing, Bernard replied, feeling a chill. It was as if Diana had managed in some mysterious way to transmit not only her genes, but her essence, her way of seeing the world to the daughter she carried. They stayed there in silence, watching the stars and the river. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the yellow trumpet trees in the garden, bringing the sweet scent of the flowers. It was a perfect night, as if the universe itself was celebrating that improbable reunion. I have something for you, Bernard said suddenly. Wait here. He went into the house and returned minutes later, carrying a small carved wooden box. He sat down again beside his daughter and opened the box, revealing the silver locket with mother-of-pearl details he had found in his office weeks earlier. This was meant to be your birth gift, he explained. Your mother and I chose it together, but I never had the chance to give it to you, until now. Yara Luisa took the locket with reverence, admiring the delicate details of the craftsmanship. It was a simple yet beautiful piece, a crescent moon surrounded by small stars, with the mother-of-pearl shimmering under the light of the real moon. It's just like the one in the dream, she whispered, marveling. What do you mean? Bernard asked, surprised. In the most recent dream, the woman, she paused, correcting herself. My mother was giving me a locket like this, saying it was to protect me whenever she couldn't be near. Bernard felt a shiver run down his spine. Coincidence? Subconscious memory? Or something deeper, more mysterious? He preferred not to question. There were things the human mind was not prepared to fully comprehend. Can I put it on now? Yara Luisa asked eagerly. Of course, Bernard replied, helping her open the clasp. The locket settled perfectly on the girl's chest, as if it had been made for her, which in fact it had been. Now I'll always have her with me, Yara Luisa said, touching the jewel with her fingers, even if it's only in dreams. And in your heart, Bernard added. That's where we keep those we love forever. The girl nodded, understanding the depth of the words. Then, unexpectedly, she began to hum softly. The melody was familiar, painfully familiar. It was the song Diana had composed for the baby, the song about the river and the stars. Bernard felt his eyes sting with contained tears. How could she know that melody? It was another of the inexplicable connections that defied logic, but confirmed what his heart already knew. The bond between mother and daughter had transcended death itself. It's getting late, little one, he said when she finished singing. Time for bed. Tomorrow will be a new day, the first of many in our new life together. Can I sleep with the window open? She asked. I want to hear the river while I sleep. Of course you can, Bernard agreed, standing up and extending his hand to her. The river has always been the best storyteller for sleeping. He led her to the newly decorated room, helped her settle into the new bed and opened the window, allowing the night breeze and the distant murmur of the Colorado River to enter freely. He activated the star lamps, which immediately projected constellations onto the ceiling and walls of the room. It's like sleeping outdoors, Yara Luisa said, enchanted. Your mother would love this, Bernard commented, sitting on the edge of the bed. She always said the desert sky had the brightest stars in the world. And it does, the girl agreed, yawning. Especially today. Bernard smiled, leaning in to kiss her forehead. Sleep well, my little Yara. Dream of the stars and the river. And of Mommy? She asked, her eyes already closing in sleep. Yes, and of Mommy, he agreed, feeling his heart warm with the naturalness with which his daughter now referred to Diana. She will always be in your dreams. When he was sure that Yara Luisa had fallen asleep, Bernard quietly left the room and returned to the porch. The starry sky seemed even brighter now, as if celebrating the reunion of that improbable family, separated by destiny and reunited by love. "Thank you, Diana," he whispered to the night. "Wherever you are, thank you for bringing her back to me." A shooting star streaked across the sky at that exact moment, like a sign, an answer. Bernard smiled. Some people would call it a coincidence. He preferred to believe it was something more. A miracle, perhaps. One of those that only the desert, with its harshness and beauty, could provide. A miracle called Yara Louisa, the girl who had crossed the Valley of Shadows to find her way back home. A year had passed since that starry night, when Bernard and Yara Louisa officially recognized each other as father and daughter. New Hope Ranch flourished as much as the family that lived within it. The grape and mango plantations were more productive than ever, as if the very land celebrated the restored harmony. Yara Louisa, now 9 years old, had visibly transformed. The thin, frightened girl from that dusty road gave way to a healthy, confident, and extraordinarily intelligent child. At St. Christopher's Elementary School, she excelled in all subjects, especially literature and science. Her teacher, Edwina, often commented on her talent for storytelling and her insatiable curiosity about the natural world. "She has a special gift," Edwina told Bernard during a parent-teacher meeting. "The way she observes everything around her, how she makes connections that even adults don't perceive. It's rare to find a child like that." Bernard smiled, proud. He knew exactly from whom Yara Louisa had inherited this sensitivity. Diana was equally observant and intuitive, always attentive to the small details that most people ignored. At home, the girl flourished under the care of her new family. Mrs. Iris, who insisted on being called Grandma, passed on ancient knowledge to her, traditional desert recipes, embroidery, folk stories her own grandmother had told her. Janine became a kind of older sister, teaching her songs, dances, and all the secrets a girl her age should know. And Bernard simply loved her with all the intensity of someone who had lost and rediscovered an invaluable treasure. The adaptation to the name Yara Louisa happened naturally. At first, she asked to be called by both names, as a way of honoring both her past and her present. But over time, Yara became increasingly natural, especially at home. At school and with friends, she continued to be Louisa, a small connection to the life she had before, a reminder that her journey, however extraordinary, was an integral part of who she was. The sky blue room had truly become her sanctuary. In addition to the furniture chosen on that special day, it now housed a small library, a terrarium with desert plants that she cultivated herself, and a growing collection of drawings and paintings that revealed her artistic talent. On the main wall, a large mural that Bernard had commissioned from a local artist, a representation of the legend of Yara, the protector of the waters, emerging from the Colorado River under a starry sky. The face of the mythological Yara had subtle features of Diana, a delicate homage that had not gone unnoticed by her daughter. "Mommy is watching over us through the river," Yara Louisa commented upon seeing the mural for the first time, with a wisdom that frequently surprised Bernard. News of the legal case had spread, inevitably. The improbable reunion between father and daughter, separated by an accident and brought together by a twist of fate, had become a celebrated story throughout the region. Local newspapers, radio programs, and even a special report on state television had covered the case, turning Bernard and Yara Louisa into reluctant celebrities. They received numerous invitations for interviews, talk shows, and even book and film, proposals based on their story. Bernard refused most, protecting his daughter's privacy and allowing her to live as normal a childhood as possible away from the spotlight. However, not everything was rosy during that year. The case against those responsible for the illegal adoption scheme ran its course, bringing forth difficult emotions to process. Josiah Pierce, Mustache Joe, was sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes, although he received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. Dr. Eugene Mason, finally extradited from Spain after months of legal battles, awaited trial for even more serious charges: falsification of medical documents, concealment of a surviving person, and criminal medical negligence. For Bernard, each hearing was a test of his capacity for forgiveness. The anger he had initially felt had given way to a more complex feeling. the understanding that, paradoxically, those criminal actions had allowed Yara Luisa to survive. If Josiah and the doctor had followed the correct protocols, taking the premature baby directly to a hospital, would she have survived the precarious neonatal care conditions in the region at that time? It was an impossible question to answer, and Bernard eventually learned to live with this moral ambiguity. Sebastian Foster, in turn, diligently fulfilled the terms of his judicial agreement. He returned all unduly received benefits, performed community service on weekends, and, surprisingly, sent small gifts to Yara Luisa on special dates, a book for her birthday, a box of chocolates for Christmas. He never tried to see her personally, respecting the new family's space, but the simple gestures indicated genuine remorse. "What do you think about inviting him to your birthday party this year?" Bernard asked Yara Luisa one morning, while they had coffee on the porch. "I know he'd like to see how you're doing." The girl thought. For a moment, playing with the mother-of-pearl locket she rarely took off her neck. "I think so," she finally replied. "He wasn't bad, just lost," as Dr. Clara explained. "And everyone deserves a second chance, right?" Bernard smiled, touched by his daughter's compassion. It was another characteristic of Diana, the ability to see the best in people, even when they themselves couldn't. "You're right, little one. I'll send him the invitation." Yara Luisa's birthday party would be a special event that year. In addition to celebrating her 10th birthday, it would also mark the one-year anniversary of the official confirmation of her identity. Bernard wanted it to be memorable, but without exaggeration. He knew his daughter well now. She preferred authentic simplicity to ostentatious luxury. They organized everything in the spacious ranch garden under the shade of the yellow trumpet trees she loved so much. Tables decorated with desert flowers, typical foods prepared by Mrs. Iris, live music with a trio of regional accordionists. Guests included her school friends, ranch employees and their families, friends Bernard had made throughout the year, and figures who had been important in their journey. Lieutenant Graham, the social worker, Dr. Clara, the lawyer, Dr. Guy, Emmett, and even Judge Harrison, who had accepted the invitation to everyone's surprise. The day before the party, while finalizing preparations, Bernard found Yara Luisa sitting by the pond, skipping stones on the water and watching the concentric circles form. "Nervous about the party?" he asked, sitting beside her. "A little," she admitted. "There will be a lot of people." "We can cancel if you prefer," he offered. "Do something smaller, just us." She shook her head, determined. "No, I want the party. It's important to celebrate, as you always say. It's just that—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Sometimes I wonder if I deserve all this." Bernard frowned, surprised. "What do you mean, little one? Of course you do." "It's just that so much happened because of me. People arrested, lawsuits, suffering. Sometimes I think it would have been simpler if I had never appeared in your life." Bernard felt his heart clench. He pulled her closer, wrapping her in a protective embrace. "Never think that again, Yara," he said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened in my life. Before I found you, I was just existing, not living. You brought back the light, the purpose, the joy. As for the difficulties, they are part of life, and I would face them all 1,000 times if the result was having you by my side." Yara Luisa smiled, comforted. She rested her head on her father's shoulder and watched the sunset reflect on the tranquil waters of the pond. "Do you know what I like most about you?" she asked, after a moment of silence. "What?" "That you always tell the truth. You don't try to protect me by pretending life is easier than it really is." Bernard smiled. It was true from the... It was. Beginning, he had decided to treat Yara Luisa with the same honesty and respect he would give an adult. He explained difficult things to her in terms she could understand, never underestimating her intelligence or sensitivity. "The truth is not always comfortable," he replied, "but it is always liberating. That's what your mother taught me." "Tell me more about her," Yara Luisa asked, as she often did. She never tired of hearing stories about Diana. "What do you want to know?" "How did you meet?" Bernard smiled, recalling that distant day that had changed his life forever. "It was at an art exhibition in Miami. I was there on business, visiting trade partners. She was a music student at the university and worked part-time as a guide at the gallery. When I first saw her, explaining the symbolism of a sculpture to a group of tourists, I was paralyzed, not just by her beauty, which was extraordinary, but by the passion with which she spoke, by the sparkle in her eyes when she described the artist's intention. "And then?" Yara Luisa encouraged, absorbing every detail. Then I patiently waited until the group dispersed and approached, pretending to be interested in the sculpture. I asked if she could explain its meaning to me, and do you know what she did? Bernard laughed at the memory. She looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You are not at all interested in this sculpture. You are interested in me. Why don't you be honest and invite me for coffee?" Yara Luisa's eyes widened, surprised and delighted. "And you invited her?" "Immediately. We had coffee at a small diner near the gallery and talked for hours. We discovered that, despite our different backgrounds, I, the son of desert ranchers, she, the daughter of university professors from the city, we had a lot in common. A love for music, for nature, for books, and most importantly, a similar vision of life, of what truly matters." "Love at first sight?" Yara Luisa asked, romantic like any girl her age. "Something like that," Bernard agreed, although your mother always said she didn't believe in that concept. She preferred to speak of recognition at first sight. She said that some souls recognize each other immediately, like old friends reuniting after a long separation. "Just like us," Yara Luisa observed, "when we met on that road." Bernard nodded, moved by his daughter's perception. "Exactly the same. An instant recognition beyond reason." They remained in silence for a moment, absorbing the beauty of that concept. Then Yara Luisa jumped up, extending her hand to her father. "Shall we go back? I want to help Grandma Iris with the cake. She promised to teach me the secret of the chocolate fudge topping." Bernard accepted the offered hand, rising. Together they walked back to the house, where the lights were already beginning to turn on against the darkening sky. It was a scene of absolute domestic peace, so common and yet so extraordinary, considering everything they had been through to get there. The next morning brought the perfect day for an outdoor party. The sky was a deep blue, without a single cloud, and a gentle breeze tempered the typical desert heat. From early on, the ranch became a hive of activity. Employees set up tables and chairs in the garden, hired decorators, hung ribbons and balloons from the trees, musicians tuned their instruments. In the kitchen, Mrs. Iris commanded an army of helpers, preparing delicacies that would make any guest surrender to gluttony. Yara Luisa woke up early, too excited to keep sleeping. She carefully chose her dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant model, in a shade of green that perfectly matched her greenish-brown eyes. Janine helped her with her hair, braiding small yellow trumpet tree flowers among her dark curls, exactly as Diana used to wear on special occasions, according to the photos Yara Luisa had studied exhaustively throughout the year. When she finally came downstairs to join the preparations, she was radiant. Bernard, who awaited her at the foot of the stairs, felt his breath catch for a moment. The resemblance to Diana at that moment was almost supernatural. "You are beautiful, my daughter," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Do I look like her?" Yara Luisa asked anxiously. "Like Mommy?" "Exactly," he confirmed. "It's like seeing Diana again, at 10 years old." The girl smiled, satisfied. It was what she hoped to hear. Throughout the year, she had developed a deep interest in everything related to her mother, her tastes, her manners, her beliefs. It wasn't a morbid obsession, Bernard knew, but a form of connection, of keeping alive the memory of someone she hadn't had the chance to know in life. Guests began to arrive around noon. First the ranch employees and their families, then Yara Luisa's school friends, followed by the more distinguished personalities, Judge Harrison, the social worker Dr. Clara, Lieutenant Graham and his wife. Dr. Emmett arrived carrying an impressively large gift, wrapped in colorful paper. "It's a telescope," he confessed to Bernard. Mrs. Iris mentioned that Yara Luisa loves astronomy like her mother. The party was proceeding animatedly when an unknown car drove through the ranch gate. It was a simple vehicle, an old but well-maintained model. As it parked, Sebastian Foster got out, visibly nervous, holding a small package. He was wearing his best clothes, clearly bought for the occasion, dress pants, a button-down shirt, polished shoes. Bernard went to meet him, extending his hand in a gesture of genuine hospitality. "Welcome, Sebastian. Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Bernard," the man replied, shaking the offered hand. "I didn't expect. After everything." "It's a day of celebration," Bernard said, "of new beginnings. Yara Louisa will be happy to see you." As if invoked by her father's words, the birthday girl approached, observing her former adoptive father with a mixture of curiosity and affection. "Hi, Mr. Sebastian," she greeted him with a small smile. "Hi, little one," he replied, visibly moved to see her so different from the frightened girl he had known. "You're beautiful. You've grown so much." After a moment of hesitation, he extended the package he was carrying. "It's nothing of great value, but I remembered you liked it." Yara Louisa opened the package carefully. It was a set of professional colored pencils, the kind artists use, with 48 different colors. Her eyes sparkled with emotion. "You remembered I like to draw," she exclaimed, genuinely surprised and touched. "Of course, I remembered," Sebastian said with a shy smile. "You always drew on the walls, on the floor, on any paper you could find. You had a natural talent." The girl impulsively stepped forward and gave him a quick hug. "Thank you. It's the perfect gift." Sebastian seemed about to cry, but controlled himself. With a nod to Bernard, he allowed himself to be led to one of the tables, where he was received with the same hospitality as all the other guests. It was, Bernard thought, a small miracle in itself. The former antagonists sharing a meal in peace, united by the well-being of the child they both in their own way loved. The most emotional moment of the party, however, was yet to come. After the cake, the birthday song, and the opening of presents, Bernard asked for everyone's attention, climbing onto a small makeshift stage. "I want to thank each and every one of you for being here on this very special day," he began. "Exactly 1 year ago, our family received official confirmation of something our hearts already knew. Yara Louisa is my biological daughter, the fruit of my love with Diana, who unfortunately is no longer with us." He paused, looking directly at his daughter, who watched him with adoration. "The journey that brought us here was extraordinary, full of pain, separation, but also of miracles, impossible coincidences, and above all, love. A love that transcended accidents, falsified documents, years of separation. A love that, in some mysterious way, remained alive in dreams, in memories that shouldn't exist, in inexplicable connections." Several people in the audience were already discreetly wiping away tears. Today we celebrate not only the 10th birthday of this incredible girl, but also the anniversary of our restored family. And to mark this date, I have prepared a special surprise. He gestured, and 2 ranch employees brought a large object covered by a cloth. They carefully positioned it in the center of the stage. "Yara Louisa, you have always shown a special talent for music, exactly like your mother," Bernard continued. "Your ear, your ease in learning melodies, even the lullaby you inexplicably knew without ever having heard it. Everything indicates that you inherited Diana's gift, and because of that, this gift seemed appropriate to me." With a fluid movement, he removed the cloth, revealing a grand piano gleaming under the afternoon sun. A collective gasp swept through the audience. "This was your mother's piano," Bernard explained. "It had been stored at her parents' house in Miami since the accident. Your maternal grandparents, who unfortunately couldn't be here today due to health reasons, agreed that it now belongs to you." Yara Louisa remained motionless for an instant, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then, slowly, she approached the instrument, touching it with reverence, as if it were a living being. Can I play it?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "It's yours," Bernard replied. "Your mother would love to know it's in your hands now." Carefully, Yara Louisa sat on the piano bench, adjusting it to her height. She had never had formal lessons, but in recent months, her tutor Edwina, who was also an amateur pianist, had begun to teach her the rudiments of the instrument on the small electric piano at school. She positioned her fingers on the keys, hesitant, and then, to everyone's astonishment, began to play. It was not a simple beginner's melody. It was the song Diana had composed, the music about the river and the stars, the one that appeared in her dreams. She played it with a fluidity impossible for someone of her age and experience, as if her hands remembered movements her conscious mind had never learned. The melody, sweet and melancholic, rose into the afternoon air, silencing all conversations, drawing all eyes. Bernard felt his legs weaken. It was like hearing Diana again, as if she had returned, through her daughter's hands, to celebrate that moment with them. Mrs. Iris, beside him, held his arm to support him. "It's a miracle, boss," the housekeeper whispered, tears streaming freely down her wrinkled face. "The music is in her blood." When the last note dissipated into the air, there was a moment of reverent silence, followed by an explosion of applause. Yara Louisa stood up, her eyes shining with emotion, and ran to hug her father. "I don't know how I did it," she said, burying her face in his chest. "My fingers seem to know what to do by themselves." "It's your mother's legacy living through you," Bernard replied, hugging her tightly. "Some gifts are so deep that not even death can erase them." The party continued, but with a different atmosphere, more solemn and at the same time more joyful. Something extraordinary had happened before everyone's eyes, something that defied rational explanations and touched on deeper, older beliefs. The continuity of life, the transmission of gifts through generations, the love that transcends the barriers of time and space. As the afternoon progressed, guests began to say goodbye. Judge Harrison, normally so formal and reserved, surprised Bernard with a genuine hug before leaving. "I've been in the judiciary for 30 years, Mr. Caldwell," he said, "and I can count on one hand the cases with truly happy endings. Yours is, without a doubt, one of them, a reminder that sometimes justice finds paths that go beyond courts and written laws." When the last guest left, the family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. It was a ritual they had established throughout the year. Bernard, Yara Louisa, Mrs. Iris, and Janine, together watching the daily spectacle of the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky red, orange, and purple. "It was the best birthday of my life," Yara Louisa declared, still wearing the flower crown her friends had made for her. "Thank you for everything, Dad." Bernard smiled, warmed by the simplicity and sincerity of that word. "Dad." It took months for Yara Louisa to feel comfortable using it, preferring to call him by his name. The first time she called him Dad was a moment of profound emotion for both, a milestone in their journey of reconnection. "You deserve this, and much more, my daughter," he replied, pulling her into a side hug. "And this is just the beginning. We have many birthdays ahead, many celebrations, many memories to build together." As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Bernard reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought him there. He remembered the devastation he had felt upon losing Diana and the baby they were expecting, the emptiness that had dominated his life for 7 long years, the fateful moment when he decided to take that secondary road instead of the usual route. On the exact day, an abandoned girl walked alone under the merciless sun. Coincidence? Destiny? Divine intervention? It didn't matter what name one gave it. What mattered was the result. A restored family, a rescued life, a love that had found its way back. The first star of the night appeared in the darkening sky, shining like a promise. Yara Louisa pointed to it, excited. "Look, it's Venus, the guiding star of sailors." "How do you know that?" Bernard asked, surprised. "I read it in the astronomy book you gave me," she replied proudly. "Venus is the first star to appear, but it's actually a planet. The ancients believed it guided lost travelers back home." Bernard smiled, touched by the symbolism. Venus, the guiding star. How appropriate that it was the first to shine on that special night, illuminating the sky over that family who had found their way back to each other against all odds. "I think she fulfilled her mission well in our case," he commented, kissing the top of his daughter's head. Mrs. Iris, who watched the scene with moist eyes, murmured an ancient prayer of gratitude. Janine smiled, resting her head on the old woman's shoulder in a display of filial affection. They were all there, united by bonds that went far beyond blood or legal documents, united by daily choices of love, care, and belonging. When night finally fell completely, and the sky became a velvet black mantle dotted with diamonds, Bernard found himself making a silent promise to Diana, wherever she was. He would care for their daughter, with all the love and dedication in the world. He would ensure she grew up strong, healthy and happy, that she developed all the extraordinary talents she had inherited, that she would never, ever forget her origins or the incredible story that had brought her there. Later, after Yara Louisa fell asleep, exhausted but radiant after the intense day, Bernard visited the piano in the music room they had improvised. He sat on the bench, observing the keys that Diana's hands had touched so many times, and that now his daughter's hands were beginning to explore. It was like a tangible link between past and present, a bridge over the abyss of loss. He didn't know how to play, had never learned, but impulsively he pressed a key, producing a clear and crystalline note that echoed in the silent room. He smiled to himself. Perhaps it was never too late to learn. Perhaps he could ask Yara Louisa to teach him, deliciously reversing the roles. The idea filled him with a quiet joy, the joy of someone who has a future to plan, dreams to build, an entire life ahead. New Hope Ranch slept now, under the starry sky of Arizona's arid heartland. Its residents rested, recharging their energies for the many happy days to come, and somewhere among the stars, Bernard liked to think, Diana smiled, satisfied to see her family reunited again, her music echoing through her daughter's talented hands, her love transcending time, space, and death itself. It wasn't an end, Bernard understood as he climbed the stairs to his own room. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter written with the colors of redemption, of second chances, of love that refuses to accept defeat, a chapter that promised to be as extraordinary as the journey that had brought them there. Across the hallway, Yara Louisa's room was silent, the door ajar, allowing a beam of light from the corridor to enter. Bernard peeked in discreetly, just to make sure everything was all right. The girl slept peacefully, the mother-of-pearl locket glowing softly against her tanned skin, the star lamps projecting constellations onto the ceiling and walls. A private universe of dreams and possibilities, protected by the love of a family that destiny had dismantled and reassembled in a mysterious and perfect way. "Good night, my star," Bernard whispered, before quietly closing the door. And so, under the protective mantle of the desert night, the story that began with a tragedy found its way to a new dawn. The story of Yara Louisa, the girl who crossed the Valley of Shadows to find her way back home. The girl who, like the legendary protector of the waters whose name she carried, had emerged from the depths of pain to bring beauty, music, and hope to everyone around her. The girl who, after all, had never truly been lost, only waiting to be found.